Eons ago, when the forest was thick and the rivers ran wild, we lived in constant fear of the Otnayarhe, the stone giants. They were no mere tales to frighten the young ones into obedience, but a terrible living nightmare that haunted our people. They emerged from the shadows of the wilderness, taller than the tallest man and broader than the largest bear, their eyes gleaming with a hunger that was not of this world. They were like men, but not like men, covered in thick hair and carrying an aura of dread that chilled the bravest warriors to the core. The stone giants had a cunning to them. They would roll in the mud by the river until it coated them from head to toe. And when it dried, it became as hard as the rocks on the riverbed, forming a protective layer that the arrows and spears couldn't penetrate. That was why we named them Stonecoat. Their raids were swift and brutal. They would descend upon our villages under the cover of the night, their massive forms moving with a surprising agility. They would bellow out a terrifying roar, a sound that echoed through the forest and froze us with fear. Before we could gather our defenses, they would already be upon us, snatching up our people as though they were little more than children's dolls. The fate of those taken was a gruesome one. The stone giants were cannibals, devouring man, woman, and child alike. Some of them would be consumed alive in a horrifying feast, and others would have their heads twisted off their bodies, a swift yet no less horrifying end. Our people lived in a constant state of terror, the threat of another raid hanging over us like a dark cloud. We fortified our villages, honed our weapons, and stood guard through the night. But it seemed no matter what we did, the stone giants could not be stopped, could not be reasoned with. And yet, we endured. We are the Iroquois, the people of the Longhouse, and we would not be driven from our land by these monsters. Through courage, ingenuity, and the favor of the Great Spirit, we managed to drive the stone giants back into the wilderness from whence they came. But their memory lingers, a grim reminder of the time when we lived in the shadow of the stone giants. We tell their tale so that we never forget the courage of our ancestors and the dangers that lurk in the wilderness. Everyone knows about the legend of Sasquatch, a tall, hairy ape man that roams the forests of the Pacific Northwest. But what most people are familiar with is only one type of Bigfoot. Whether they are a separate species or subspecies or just a different variety, there are others. Almost every culture in the world has one legend or another of an elusive ape man that can never be captured but is sighted occasionally deep into the wilderness. Let's get into some different types of Bigfoot. The Type 1 Bigfoot, aka the Patty type. This is the classic Sasquatch. It looks like a cross between a human and a mountain gorilla. It has a large, powerful build and a thick, broad chest and black hair and gray skin. Other hair colors reported are brown, auburn, cinnamon, and occasionally white. The head, though massive, has been described as relatively small for the body. Type 1 sometimes develop a sagittal crest, which can look like a person wearing a hoodie. They have a conspicuous brow ridge with a receding forehead, giving the eyes a deep-set look. The eyes are hard to see, but have been reported to be proportionally further apart than that of the human eyes. Type 1s have a flat face with a prominent cheekbones and a square jaw. The mouth region is only slightly protuberant. The nose is near human in shape, though pug or flat, sometimes with forward-directed nostrils. The height average for the sampled population is 7 foot 10 inches. However, alpha males have been reported at 9 foot and larger. The average type 1 is estimated to weigh between 500 and 800 pounds. Type 2s. They seem more ape-like than the type 1s, and they are reported in many areas of North America, but especially in the South. Type 2s have a bestial man-like build and large eyes with a large pupil dilation for night vision. The hair is most often reported as black, but auburn, orange, and cinnamon have been reported. A bit smaller than the type 1s, the average height is around 7 feet. Type 2s tend to be very territorial and they can be aggressive. They seem to kill a lot of livestock, especially the smaller varieties such as goats and chickens. Type 2s leave human-like footprints, but can seem very much like known primates, especially chimps, orangutans, and billy apes. Type 3 is something like a mandrill-human mix. They look similar to a Bigfoot, but more savage or primal. Descriptions of the face vary, but most reports describe a large dog, bear, baboon face bipedal mammal. Type 3s can be extremely tall, 10 to 15 feet reported, with oversized heads that look more monster-like than ape-like. They tend to live up in the mountains, but they will come down for food. The fur is typically dark or deep brown. One witness even reporting seeing a type 3 wearing animal pelt over their fur. They may eat humans, but reports of man-eating are rare and often based on very old legends. Type 3s tend to incite reports of paranormal characteristics, like having glowing red eyes or being bulletproof at close range. Type 3 is a very recent classification. Traditionally, these types were called kukways or gugwas, a kind of man-eating ogre from Micmac Indian folklore. Type 4 reports often come from the northeast. They have been referred to as early man Bigfoot and the American Almas. They are the most human-looking of the hairy bipedal humanoids, possessing traits of the archaic prehistoric man. They're typically a bit leaner than the type 1s, but are still large and well-muscled. A hairy Homo heidelbergensis is a decent model for the type 4. They have less facial hair than the other types. The crown of the head can have thinning hair or even be bald on top. Some eyewitnesses have reported beards and mustaches ranging from just noticeable to fully grown. Type 4s have round, not conical heads. Their noses are hooded. The mouth is wider than what we would consider normal. The teeth are square and human-looking. The skin color is pasty gray or black with a leathery appearance. Some people think these are hybrids, part human, part novel primate. That may be, but all members of the genus Homo developed and used tools. There are no reports of type 4s using tools of any kind. If they are human, even pre-modern, why would they stop creating and using tools? Now that we have went over some of the different types of Bigfoot, let's get into a specific subspecies of the Bigfoot, the Genoskwa. The Janoskiwa is a subspecies of the Sasquatch mentioned in Native American folklore as the stone giant man, mainly the Iroquois tribe. It is reported as Sasquatch's larger, bulkier, and more definitely aggressive cousin. In the Iroquois legend, this hairy hominid was known as Atnayarhe or Atnayarhe, which also translates to stone giant or stonecoat. The name stone giants was derived from the fact that the Genoskwa would roll first in sap or mud and later in river rocks or shrubs found on the wilderness floor. Interestingly, the Wendigo were also said to have impenetrable skin due to the thick layers of mud and debris strewn about their bodies. And just the same, the Wendigo were also said to freeze their intended prey with ungodly howls and screams. Wendigo are often depicted as muscular, fur-covered monstrosities, a depiction that would fall more in line with the Genoskwa. So was there some hybridization in the two legends? The Genoskwa is said to reach 9 to 11 feet tall and 800 to 1,030 pounds with cone-shaped heads and 6 digits on their hands and feet. The Genoskiwa is depicted as gorilla-like and sometimes even more humanesque in the physical description. The Genoskiwa are said to live in both the USA and Canada. They are said to leave footprints with claws on the prints and scratches on trees to mark its territory. The Genoskiwa appear to be almost identical to Sasquatch, except they have sharper teeth and their fur around their head and necks tend to be shaggier. Also, the coat colors for the Genoskiwa tend to be darker than their Bigfoot brethren. Let's get into the history of the Genoskiwa. The Genoskiwa were at one time the law keepers of the Sasquatch. Their first and last line of defense against threats to their most important sites would be to crush their most hated foes. However, time was not kind to the Genoskiwa, and when the regression that took all Sasquatch hit, the Genoskiwa's response was not to come together, but distance themselves even further. Their response to humans went from often scaring or warning them to outright predating on them, and it has become a tradition among the Genoskiwa to capture entire settlements or camping parties and devour them all in one massive orgy of carnage and feasting. The only thing keeping them from doing it more often was both their own dwindling numbers and climate. This forced the Genoskwa to be rather nomadic, wandering almost the entire northern border of the United States, though their original stomping grounds were in fact the lands of the Iroquois around Lake Ontario. They gradually migrated more and more west until they now migrate from Washington to Ohio and the bleeding edges of New York, often picking off homeless, campers, and lone travelers. Genoskiwa compete with other man-eaters and super predators, like the hide-behind and BBR for territory and prey. It's not often that a Genoskiwa loses these contests, and often only because it was alone or not fully grown. A typical troop of Genoskiwa readily drives out other predators and feeds on everything else that is still in the area. Today, Genoskiwa are outright mythical in rarity with enigma levels and activity of other cryptids, and fantastic beasts, luring them out of their boogeyman status. While still rare, they are now active again and growing bolder. It is unknown if the resurgence of the Sasquatch tribes will temper the Genoskwa's predating habits or drive them over the edge entirely. Now let's get into the personality of the Genoskwa. To say a Genoskwa is a sadistic serial predator with a bully mentality and an almost pathological hatred for human beings would be a colossal understatement. Genoskwa don't just dislike or distrust humans, they loathe them and at the same time hunger for their flesh as a necessary aspect of their survival that has allowed them to weed out weaknesses that afflicted other Sasquatch, but at an even greater cost to their own numbers. A Genoskwa does not fear being seen, but wisely avoids it, as a predator would avoid allowing prey to see it until it's caught. They are giant bipedal terrors that other Sasquatch and Bigfoot avoid out of pragmatism. A Genoskwa's reaction to be bested or foiled is a vindictive one, and is rarely letting go of a grudge. Now let's get into the aggressive behavior of the Genoskwa. The Genoskwa, also known as a Wendigo, is the world's most dangerous type of Bigfoot. Yes, guys, there are other types of Bigfoot who aren't your usual non-aggressive patty type behavior Bigfoots, and I'm surprised to learn this too. The Genoskwa eat and kill anything that they see. These stone giants raided villages and carried off women and children when the men were off hunting or at war. Alright guys, this is going to get a little bit grisly. Can you handle it? Most of the captives were devoured alive, or like a chicken. They had their heads twisted off before consumption. The Genoskwa have fangs and sharp claws, and almost like a regular Sasquatch, but more scary and aggressive. People who have seen these monsters have said that these Bigfoots are North American nightmares. They are located on the northern parts of the USA and all over Canada with the North American Sasquatch. And let me just say that it is not a good thing if you have been snatched up by a Genoskwa, because this means that it wants you to be its next meal. And they, the Genoskwa, are close cousins to the Sasquatch, but where the Sasquatch are peaceful and easygoing, the Genoskwa are aggressive and carnivorous. The Genoskwa are hostile to humans, but they're also afraid of them when they are in large numbers. The Genoskwa were said to raid Native American camps and carry away their inhabitants. The majority of these poor souls would be eaten alive in one large feast. However, some would be decapitated first by means of intense head twisting. The Genoskwa are also known to throw rocks at people. Even though the Genoskwa are cousins and subspecies to Bigfoot, they are more related to the Wendigo than you know. The Genoskwa is said to hunt man for the purpose of predation, preying on man and other animals. According to the first native tribe legends, the Genoskwa would unleash a high-pitched whistle to cause panic amongst their prey, so the prey in turn would freeze in fear. Added to the creature's arsenal is infrasound, which is a low-frequency wave below 20 Hz that is undetectable to human hearing. The vibrations cast across the vocal cords was fueled by the creature's enormous lung capacity that created panic and was capable of damaging soft organs. Known as prey detection, the Genoskwa have developed a unique form of echolocation that sounds like a series of deep clicks. These clicks help it pinpoint prey in the area, which makes hiding from a Genoskwa quite difficult. This ability has a range of several dozen feet and can even reach a mile if executed underground. The Genoskwa, being very territorial, literally ripped trees out of the ground live, turned them upside down, and shoved them top first back into the hole where they were ripped out as a sign that you are in their territory. And this is why Native American tribes still highly avoid these areas where they do see those signs. The Genoskwa is weighted in at 600 to 1,000 pounds, ranging in height from 9 to 11 feet tall, and stalked mountain ranges from Alaska down the length of Canada onto the Rockies and across the Sierra Range of the United States. Recent reports have come in from Ohio and Kentucky, with occasional reports scattered across the rest of the United States. The Genoskwa have a redundantly cruel degree of physical power, even more so than the average member of the Sasquatch family, due to their Spartan lifestyle and development of natural armor across much of their body. And this makes them very, very strong. Well, not as nimble as their relatives, a Genoskwa is still rather fast for a creature of their size, and they know how to use it in conjunction with their strength. A Genoskwa is capable of deadlifting the likes of a tank and then throwing it several yards away, and it could easily tear apart the tank if it felt so inclined. One with the stone, the Genoskwa are skilled rock throwers and prefer rocks and boulders to any other form of projectile. The Genoskwa will even wade into battle with a stone in each hand to batter and bludgeon their prey to death, or to subdue them so that they can be captured. Their rock armor also allows them to hide amongst the rocky cliffs, the mountain sides, and in the inside of caves through their natural camouflage. Alright, now let's get into their armored fur coating. The Genoskwa become bulletproof to protect themselves from the weapons of the time, like the arrows, the bow and arrows of the Iroquois, or whichever tribe. And the Genoskwa seem to know to adapt to changes and become more bulletproof as the times go, from their prey using arrows to using muskets. Now, maybe they weren't so bulletproof when the muskets started being used, and either their numbers dropped or they were just smart enough to know how to hide better, or maybe that's why we aren't hearing so much about the Genoskwa sightings so much these days. But we are told through tribes such as the Algonquin tribe that the Genoskwa have become immune to the weapons of each of the times, and that modern-day Sasquatch use the same techniques to shield themselves. Isn't it amazing how humanistic and smart that the Genoskwa must be to know how to do this? Was it from watching the humans protect themselves? I mean, how did they learn these techniques to shield and camouflage themselves? The Iroquois often speak of creatures known as the Genoskwa that would roll around in the mud and granite, limestone, along the ridgelines where they lived before raiding the villages below. This process was believed to make them impervious to the Iroquois arrows. The Genoskwa were said to exude a horrible odor from their armpits that is described as a mixture between that of a skunk and a dead animal. Gorillas have been known to release such body odor as a form of communication. The Genoskwa also possess a unique ability to secrete a pheromone that possesses acute hallucinatory capabilities. When a Genoskwa detects prey or threats nearby, it will begin to release this pheromone, which affects targets' abilities to distinguish reality. Targets affected will not actually see the Genoskiwa, but instead a more friendly being, usually a friend or a loved one. Genoskiwa uses this ability to flee or to sneak up on a target while in full view of the person. This ability also explains why no one ever reports seeing a Genoskiwa. People probably have, they just thought it was something else or someone else. Oh my gosh, well, that explains it. There is one flaw in the Genoskiwa's abilities. They can make others see them as someone else, but they cannot mimic the voices of others. The Genoskwa cannot be detected because they never speak or make any vocal noises in order to maintain their disguise. Alright guys, let's get into the Genoskwa's weaknesses. That's right guys, they have some weaknesses. The Genoskiwa are heavier than other Bigfoot and do not pursue prey in quite the same way. They cannot spontaneously vanish, and they often favor outright ambush or stoically stalking their prey until it is cornered or exhausted. So it is possible to outrun a Genoskiwa, but escaping it entirely is often another matter. Chinks in the armor. The Genoskiwa's armor is not foolproof. It has vulnerable areas around the joints, hands, feet, and face. So these make good targets for ranged projectiles, providing that they have enough power to pierce through the additional layer of fur, muscle, and bone that the Genoskiwa have in abundance. And it's also worth noting that the Genoskiwa do not spontaneously create their armor, but must steadily repair and replace their armor over time and altogether if a patch is lost. The Genoskiwa, they do makeshift their armor sometimes with mud, but this is just a temporary measure until limestone can be applied. Being stone, explosives are effective against the Genoskiwa, should one actually have some on hand. Intense heat, fire, heat stroke, and explosions are a problem for the heavily protected Genoskiwa, who quickly tire and suffers greatly from prolonged exposure to such temperatures. And this makes them very active in the winter and fall, but not so active in the summer and spring. Brutal. The Genoskiwa are perhaps the most ruthless and aggressive breed of Bigfoot known to exist. Their almost single-minded desire to capture, kill, and destroy intruders and lawbreakers can be as much a detriment as it is a boon. Their own ingrained sadism lends them to capture large groups of captives alive, simply to devour them all at once. They operate as single individuals or small groups, as competition among the Genoskwa is strong. The Genoskwa themselves despise weakness in any form, and this makes them thankfully rare, even by Bigfoot standards. Outside of combat and hunting, the Genoskwa lag behind all, but the most regressive Sasquatch in terms of medicine, crafting, tool use, and communication. The Genoskwa do not create art, save for macrame totems cobbled together from previous mills and kills. Tuscarora chief Elias Johnson, an 1800s chronicler of his tribe's history and lore, wrote of stone giants' history and legends, traditions, and laws of the Iroquois, stating, "The Tuscarora were also invaded by a more powerful enemy, the Otnayarhe, or the Stonish giants," saying, "They were a powerful tribe from the wilderness, tall, fierce, and hostile, and resistance to them was vain." These giants were not only of great strength, but they were cannibals, devouring men, women, and children in their inroads. The Mountain Monsters team also hunted for the Stonish Giant in Harrison County, Ohio. Alright guys, time to come to the conclusion. The Genoskwa have a highly respected place among Bigfoot as protectors of their most sacred places. They are also the law keepers of the Bigfoot and are responsible for apprehending those who violate their traditions or gravely endanger their tribes. Their long isolation from other Bigfoot have both helped and hindered their responsibility. As well, they have retained much of their knowledge. That knowledge has been warped into something incredibly violent and brutal. Thus, they are respected but also feared among their unarmored kin, who view them as ill omens. Bigfoot relatives rarely interfere with the Genoskwa unless absolutely necessary. Their extremely territorial and aggressive nature makes them dangerous to approach, and few creatures do so willingly unless they are much larger or stronger. The Genoskwa occupy a unique and fearsome place within the Native American folklore. Its immense size, aggressive nature, and distinctive stone-like appearance sets it apart from the other Sasquatch legends. Revered as a guardian of the wilderness and a symbol of strength, the Genoskwa serves as a reminder of the importance of respecting nature and the consequences of transgressing into its boundaries. As with many mythical creatures, the Genoskwa continues to captivate the imagination of people, preserving the rich cultural heritage of Native American folklore. Alright guys, so that ends this episode of the Genoskwa. Now I was calling it the janoskiwa. I don't know if it matters, and I really hope it's not going to bug anybody to hear the janoskiwa all the way through almost. If it matters, let me know. But it was just so interesting to learn about the subspecies of the Sasquatch. So interesting. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Thank you guys for watching and being here. And I will see you next time for another episode of Tales Told in the Dark.